National Signing Day. It is not the number one entry on the recruiting calendar. It is today. Chuck Oliver Show comes to you on a Wednesday. It is December 16th, and this is the opening of the 3-day early signing period for high school athletes, JUCO, etc., to sign their letters of intent to play football. Again, 3-day early signing period in 2017, which was the first time this was available. This was a game changer. I remember Dabo Swinney was one who said he wanted the early signing period, but he wanted it in August before the senior season would have began. But the settled on date were the 3 days. I think it was the 20th, 21st, and 22nd, maybe that first year. And there were coaches who did not plan for this correctly, and there were programs. Because the coach didn't plan, there were programs that got left behind. You can't skip a class and not really have it affect you. There are times when, if you've been recruiting, whatever your relative level is, we're 18, 18, 16, and then you have a recruiting class that finishes 45th, it's going to affect you some. Just like if you're normally recruiting 5th, 6th, 7th, and then 28th, it's going to affect you. And so there were coaches who did not properly plan for this, and they missed out. What do you mean they missed out? 74% of FBS-level prospects signed during the early signing period, and specifically on the very first day of the signing period. 74%. Oh, my gosh. Jumped to 81% the next year, 82% in 2019. This year's different, and coming into the day, I don't know how the numbers will turn out. Coming into the day, I thought there would be less activity. That has not been the case. The 4 stars, the 5 stars, the premier talent coming off the board. There's been plenty of flips. Ole Miss continues to head in the right direction. There was one kid, though, and he's an offensive tackle out of Texas. Savion Byrd, the number 9 offensive tackle in America. And it's the one thing, folks, I've always said, specifically defensive tackles and then offensive linemen. You don't have enough, ever. Nobody ever has enough of those. And Savion Byrd, he listed LSU, Auburn, and Oklahoma as his final 3. He had offers from everybody. He's an offensive tackle. He's a top 10 prospect at the position. Kid out of Texas. That's not nothing. The number 62 prospect overall nationally by 24/7 Sports. Again, this is a kid out of Duncanville. Dan, where's Duncanville?
Dallas area.
All right. So if you're if you're the 9th rated offensive tackle in America, I'm still going to look to see where you come from. Do you remember Bjorn Werner? He was a first-round pick of the Colts, played at Florida State, big German kid. He came from a Class A, tiny little private school, I believe, up in Connecticut. And the recruiter was there to see somebody else play. And they're like, who's that big? They had to teach Bjorn Werner. They had to instruct him how to properly put on shoulder pads. And so he's the number 1 player in the state. Well, it's the state of Connecticut. And Bjorn Werner, you know what he did at FSU? Kind of ran around, hit some people, made some plays. Then he got in the NFL, and he couldn't run around and hit people anymore because he wasn't that refined. He wasn't that advanced. He was a big, strong, physical kid who could move, blah, blah, blah. He wasn't a great football player, it turns out. Not at the NFL level, and that happens to plenty of people. But he was from Connecticut. When you're the number 5, number 10, whatever player in the state of Texas, folks, that's not nothing. And Savion Byrd, 4-star offensive tackle from Duncanville, Texas, announced this morning that he's headed to Oklahoma. There is a big deal being made already, and this is the reason I'm picking Savion Byrd to talk about. Because when he sat down, he had helmets and he had caps and he had all kinds of things there he was going to pick. And again, his final 3, I believe, were LSU, Auburn, and OU. And he picks Oklahoma. But it wasn't just those caps that he's bouncing back and forth, like when you try to find which one the baseball is under at the stadium during the 7th inning stretch. It wasn't just him monkeying around with the caps. Once he put the OU cap on, horns down. Now, obviously, living in Texas, I get the relevance there. Is it something that I would do? No. but I'm a grown man. He's a high school kid. Is it something that folks responding to Savion Byrd going horns down at his press conference? Why'd that kid have to do it? Show some class. Yes, because you're an adult. You're part of grown folk. And we are wanting to inject adult, mature sensibility into a 17-year-old high school student having truly one of his best days ever. But we want to inject adult, mature, mainstream sensibility into this kid who's got New Year's Eve bouncing off every corner inside his brain right now. This is the end of the rainbow for him. And so he gets excited and goes horns down. Show some class. He's 17. Hush up, you. And who am I speaking to? Who is you there? I promise you somebody who isn't 17. You know, I've said this before, this general idea. And I told you when I used to coach, when I used to teach high school, like I would tell a kid, you know, if you're asking for advice or I see that you're doing this, and it could be football, it could be the classroom, it could be applying to college, it could be whatever. And I would tell the kid, if he would ask or she would ask, I would say, here's my input. I've been 30 and 15. You've only been 15. So you might want to pay some mind to this. There is a flip side where there is allowance on the other side. There's immaturity and lack of worldly knowledge and experience, and you've never been fired, and you've never dumped somebody or been dumped or, you know, whatever. All these life experiences that when you are 30 or 40 or 50, you look at someone and go, yeah, you've been 22? Yeah, I've been 22 and 50. So if you want some input, here you go. Well, it's not just the instruction side of that. There is also an allowance built in. Because Savion Byrd is 17, if he gets excited on his day and wants to go horns down, should he do it? Probably not. Is it immature? Yeah. Is it sort of a personal slight that it would be so much better just to celebrate you instead of putting somebody else down? Absolutely. He's 17. He is a high school student having one of his best days ever. And he's excited about it. So, yeah, I side with you about what it is. Oh, he shouldn't do that. Why do you have to denigrate somebody else? You don't. 17. I've told you, mullet, IROC Z28. So when we're 17, that's me, folks. When we're 17, we don't all make good decisions. Mullet, IROC. I wish all I did was go horns down. So Savion Byrd, if you see that out there, don't click on it. It's not a big deal. It's a kid who was excited about his day. All right, we're going to take a quick break, come back with all the headlines, the moving, everything going on with the recruiting. Chuck Oliver Show continuing on a Wednesday. That's Gary Barta. He is the CFP chairperson, and he was answering some questions. He's talking a lot about Cincinnati there. He's really talking about Florida. And let me tell you what I will translate all. I'll boil down all, because he started getting into committee chair, so to speak, here. Here's the short version. They're going to protect Florida. That the point is to have Florida ranked high enough so that when they lose Saturday, they still get one of the New Year's Six Bowls. Florida's losing Saturday. They're going to drop down. What will that be, 8-3?
Yes.
Okay, 8-3. They're going to lose Saturday. I think it'll be kind of bad, like probably 3 touchdowns, and they will be protected, which normally there was an idea that you would, quote, protect the loser. And I know this because I was on the selection committee for 13 or 14 years with the Chick-fil-A Bowl. That you would try your best to protect the loser of the SEC championship game, because in some years it was a matchup like this year where you kind of think you know the outcome, and Florida's like, look, if not for having to play in the SEC, and they want to play, they do, but I'm saying that there are years where you look at the participants and you go, yeah, this team's about to get saddled with another loss. So that's part of it. I think it's absurd that Florida loses at home to not just an overmatched team. That was who got off the plane on Friday in Gainesville. I'm talking about the team that kicked off Saturday night, the LSU team that kicked off Saturday night. It wasn't the team that got off the plane. And it also wasn't the team that was beginning the fourth quarter. We had Moscone on. Was that Monday? We had Moscone on. And I asked him, hey, at the beginning of the fourth quarter, like after, Flott got ejected and Ricks had been hurt and Stingley never took the field, I said, who are your top 3 corners? And there was a pause. Now, understand, Matt Moscone, all he does every single day is talk about LSU. And there was a pause, and he was like, hang on. And he started going through them, and then he started laughing. And he said, well, this is a redshirt sophomore, and he never plays. And this is a freshman, and he never plays. And they got 3 straight 3 and out. I think 3 straight 3 and outs, I believe, or 2. It was an awful, awful loss. But if you're a Florida fan and you were expecting a little different, I don't want to say you're going to fall further, because they have been very clear that from week to week, they don't necessarily take all that into account. It's not a fall. They start with a blank ballot every week. But they also, one thing Barta mentioned in an extended comment, I don't know if we have this clip available, but in the extended comments, he talked specifically. Dana, did you hear him talking about Kyle Pitts specifically? He said, oh, yeah, and we took into account that they were playing without Kyle Pitts. Now, they have been on the record and they have been consistent that if a team plays a game and loses and they play that game without a significant contributor, the committee will. I've always thought that was crap. You know what that does? It takes away the potential advantage that a program, for instance, like Alabama, would have when Tua gets hurt and he has to go to Jalen Hurts. Bully for Nick Saban. Shouldn't that count for something? Versus Clemson losing its starting quarterback and they don't have a like replacement. Well, you're not going to have a replacement for a guy like that. Nick Saban did. And it takes away any credit for having built a team with that unbelievable depth. When the committee looks at anybody else and go, yeah, well, you had to play without this guy, so we'll take that into consideration. Screw that. You got 84 other kids. Go earn your scholarship. So they took into account, that was, like I said, that was part of the extended comments that went on after that clip. He mentioned Kyle Pitts specifically. I have never, since 2014, have never agreed with that being part of the college football playoff committee's criteria, that's an allowance they would make. But that absolutely is what they do. Signing day 2020 continues. Dan Matthews will be in here in just a second. Actually, I'm going to bring him in right now. I saw that the Georgia Bulldogs, they're trying to land a top 5 or top 3 class. Maybe they'll get number 1. I don't know. But the Bulldogs lost a commitment today. Dan, if the Georgia Bulldogs, this was a 4-star JUCO corner, Dejon Warren. He flipped from the Georgia Bulldogs. He was a commit, 4-star corner. And who would he flip to normally?
Top of mind, I would just say Nick Saban in Alabama.
That's a good choice if it wasn't Alabama, because they're full at corner. Who would he flip? Give me some others.
Let's say Florida. Why not?
How about Jackson State?
Ooh.
4-star JUCO corner Dejon Warren flipped from the Georgia Bulldogs to Jackson State. Now, this is not me glomming on and wanting to seem like, oh, yeah, I'm all about equality. I'm a civil rights trailblazer. This is not the commentary I'm about to give. Folks, I've said this for a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago. The decline and what was looking like the extinction of HBCU football programs, because they're expensive to run. You got to put a whole lot of kids on scholarship. You could probably fill 3 or 4 or 5 other sports with scholarships versus filling one football team with scholarships. And so Jackson State is important. I've talked about that in the past. Grambling, I talked back during I want to say in the spring. There was a deal announced. Grambling or Southern signed a deal with LSU for a future game, and I was like, pay them now. Do whatever you can. Pay them now. They need the money right now. They may not survive. It is an important part of college football, and it has become irrelevant, and that's the truth. We saw the 5-star basketball prospect commit to Howard University about 4 or 5 months ago. You are seeing sort of a resurgence, and I hope it is not just a sort of a feeling of the month. That with things like HBCU survival on your mind, you're getting some pretty high prospects, recruits flipping to Jackson State, for instance. I hope it's not just a feeling of the moment and it passes, because these really are important parts of college football history, and it would be kind of cool if they were part of college football's presence. So, yeah, the Georgia Bulldogs lost a kid to Jackson State. Dan, what's up?
Well, I mean, I think it also, too, I can kind of see the wavelength of what he's thinking is I could go play for just another Power 5 defensive backs coach, or I could go play for a guy who not only has a gold jacket, he is the standard at playing the position.
He's the best I've ever seen.
And thinking that the head coach is going to take in a special interest in me. I mean, I can see the appeal to it, especially for a young guy his age. So we'll see how that goes. You know, Chuck, it's one of those things that I'm glad that people are not jumping on these teams for, and that is the kind of daily opt-outs we're seeing of bowl games, because I really have got to remind people of what these guys have committed to this season. Since mid-July, they have been every day, facility, their house, their apartment, their dorm, having things stuck up their nose, having to go through different things,
the stress
eating out
has
of a
been
box,
unrelenting.
all the different types of things that they're not getting the normal experience. And I get it. They're not normal college students. That's what they signed up for, and you are treated differently. But at the same time, though, too, when you got Christmas coming up, and it's one of those things that you're saying, hey, guys, we could go play in the New Mexico Bowl. New Mexico's an all right place, even though they're playing it in Texas. But really, Coach, let's just call it a year and let's come back in the spring. And I think coaches want that, honestly, Chuck, because, yes, bowl games are nice. You get all the gadgets. You get everything from that. But at the same time, though, I got enough to deal with on a daily basis. I don't want to have to deal with anything else of this caliber. Let's just get the vaccines out. Let's get the spring, and let's get going for 2021.
Yeah, they've been doing everything you brought up, and going to class and going to school and having to make numbers in class so that they could stay eligible. So it has been there's a lot of layers to the onion, and I agree. I am fully in line with teams that have opted out. It's the main event. You know what it is. Bottom of hour one on Wednesdays. We always have Chris Landry from LandryFootball.com on. I have a paid subscription, folks. I'm not saying it's deserved or should be, but I got all kinds of folks throwing, just use our site and talk about it. Here's a free membership. And I'm like, no, I'll pay for Landry Football. I will pay for Landry Football over some free sites where they're going to say, hey, we're just going to give you access. That's how good this stuff is. It's every day of the week. It is every day of the year, whether it's May or Super Bowl Sunday, you're going to find good stuff there, including Twitch TV, where if you choose, you can actually watch me talk about college football. I want to welcome him on now, the namesake from LandryFootball.com. It is Chris Landry. Chris, how are you today?
Chuck, I'm doing well. A lot going on. Good to be with you as always.
Yeah. Before we jump into the stories of the moment, talk about the website a little bit because everything is there from today, obviously recruiting to when you get to the NFL playoffs to the draft. It's everything.
Yeah, it is. So certainly we've got the latest signings today as the news comes about. We'll provide a look. You can see that right on top of the website where you can click on it, and you can not only see where the players as they announce, but more importantly, what's their skill set, what they're all about. And you've had here in the last couple of days kind of an announcement of a schedule, the teams to watch today, and the top 300 overall prospects with scouting notes on all of them. So you can get top 150 and then 151 to 130. Gives you of the players that are graded in that blue, that red area, that top tier area. You're going to hear about them. You get to learn about the players that go to your school or your rival schools or what have you, a little bit about them and what their skill set's like. So that's what we provide for you. Certainly, we do the same thing with the NFL draft and certainly breaking down the college game, the pro game, coaching searches. We've got all of that information up there. So this is, as I mentioned when we came on, such a busy time because you've got coaching searches. You've got signing day, which I hate early signing day being right where it is, by the way. You've got now this year the conference championship games this weekend. And so a lot's going on at the same time. I don't think college football maximizes the calendar, but it is certainly an important time and one in which probably 75% of the players are going to sign today.
All right, Chris, before we're going to get into all the championship games coming up on Saturday, and we'll cover all those, but let's hit a couple of quick recruiting points. There's something that I bring up from time to time because there's a reason to from time to time. When everybody made fun of Derek Dooley that day when he stopped practice and marched the team into the locker room to say it matters how you keep your locker room, everything matters. Well, that wasn't just Derek Dooley. He used to coach for Nick Saban. I've never seen a coach who truly believes everything matters. Everything can be a 1% advantage, and it doesn't come to roost on Saturday afternoon against an opponent the way it does in recruiting. That man and that program is just a machine. They're going to finish with the number one class again.
Yeah, they are. And, the thing about it is, like me, they didn't like this early signing day. And when it first came out, it took them one class in which they dropped to a top 5 class. And by gosh, gulp, they didn't have the number one class. And it took them exactly one class to figure out and get back to number one again for, being able to figure this out. All right, we're going to have signing day in December now, the early day, and this is how we're going to do it. Just kind of like, don't like all this up-tempo offense. We're going to adjust to that pretty quick, and boom, now you got the best offense in college football. So the ability to adjust, the attention to details, the ability to craft not only a large staff, but and this is of all the things he learned from Belichick, defining the roles for everybody on that staff is what's important. So you've got a role, and your responsibility is to evaluate and coordinate for the secondary coach all the defensive back recruiting candidates, and it kind of siphons up to where there's no stone unturned. There has to be the critical factor report grade on every of those players. And the head coach, there's not a player that gets offered without the head coach watching the film and writing a report on it. It's that level of detail is what makes a huge difference. And I think, it leads to everything that goes on into the whole process of making sure that you get it right. Everybody thinks, oh, well, they're Alabama. They can get anybody they want. Yeah. So who are they going to get?
You
who
have
are they going to
evaluate correctly. Chris, I always talk about when people say, oh, they got to recruit better. I'm like, there's a step that nobody ever talks about. You have to evaluate first.
Yeah. It's not like when Coach Bryant was doing it where you'd sign 25 running backs in a year and you hear about a running back late that Mississippi State was on, and you sent a GA down there and you offered him. You had no idea who he was, no idea whether he could play, but you'd sign him anyway. So now you got 28 running backs you sign in a year with unlimited scholarships, and you'd have scrimmages all spring, all long, and then you'd figure out who can play once you got them on campus. Can't do that now. You have to evaluate systematically and make sure that you offer the right guy. And that is tougher for the school and the player to make that determination of the right fit this year more than ever because you don't have the in-person evaluation. So the ability to adjust on anything football related, training room, strength, the weight room, recruiting, on field, they're always prepared. There's no question.
Chris, let's go across the state to Auburn, and there are now 8 kids who have signed a letter of intent with Auburn this morning. Who are they signing with? Because I'm asking that kind of funny, but I'm like, who did you sign with? Like, is there? I keep hearing Kevin Steele from people that know a lot more than me, and I'm thinking, and not to be just too bird's eye on this, but it's supposed to be young and offensive side of the ball, not 65-year-old white guy coaching linebackers as the head coach.
Well, the key is, at Auburn is the connection to the people that are making the decision. And in this particular case, it's Raymond Harvard.
I am so tired of this at my alma mater.
Yeah, well, and that's the way it is because I can tell you Kevin Steele is that job's been – that's been settled for a while now with my understanding. This is just a matter of we'll have a search committee and they're going to find that Kevin Steele, quote unquote, is the best guy for them. I'd be shocked if it's anything otherwise. Everything I've been told is that. And they're going to have the way they're going to couch it and talk about it. But the names that you've been hearing out there has been put out for a purpose so they can say, we looked at all those guys and this is what we've got. But they've got 12 guys, 12 commitments. And I think this is one of the problems with the calendar. So if you're going to make a decision on a coach, anywhere, anytime, I believe early signing day should be late July. If you want to have an early signing day. If you're going to have an early signing day, make it early. December is not early relative to February. It's ridiculous. Have early signing day in August, and then you have the signing day is the first week of March, first Wednesday in March. That way you have plenty of time for schools to make their coaching changes, put their staff together, and get the recruiting class, up to speed. And I think that would be the better way to do it. But it's not what you asked. What they're signing with is obviously those and they've got, you mentioned 8. I think they'll get the remaining 4. Doesn't look like anybody's going to waiver, but they're going to keep the scholarships for 2022 transfers and obviously making decisions that are going to be post announcement of the new coach hire. I think that's how it's going to play out.
All right, one quick thing before we take a break, and I have talked about this quite a bit. If you don't know about Doug Williams and Elvin Bethea and Joe 747 Adams, you don't know all you need to about college football, Chris. I've said HBCUs are important, and it kind of is. It's kind of put some wind in my sails what Deion Sanders is doing at Jackson State.
Yeah, certainly his personality and his ability to probably more than anything to raise funds and have people that he's been involved with business-wise to put money in his program and to do certain things and obviously sell his background. And certainly it starts with a couple of kids, including ones with his last name that are his sons, and then he goes and gets a really good junior college corner that, you can sell on, hey, you come here, you can be a star. And I'm sure the sell point is, well, you come here and get you the NFL. Well, that has nothing to do with anything because he's not going to get anybody into the NFL any better. In fact, it's tougher for him to do it, but he's got a name and he's got some notoriety and probably will be on, I would imagine, some TV a little bit more. Let's remind folks, they're actually, and I don't know if they're going through with it. I've lost track, but they're scheduled for a spring schedule. I don't know if they're going to go through with it. But Look, I mean, it's great. It's neat. It's not sustainable, that change, obviously, with integration, because when HBCUs were really prominent with putting a lot of pro prospects in, it was when the Deep South was not allowing those players. So players that couldn't go to Ole Miss and Mississippi State and LSU, they would go to Jackson State.
And Chris, nobody had money, which means nobody had facilities. So it really wasn't that big a difference if you were visiting Grambling or Louisiana Tech.
And then you had a generation gap. So meaning, like, okay, you didn't go to you may have grown up watching a school at a major school, and other players would go there, but your family, your mom and dad, doesn't look at an SEC school or a Southwest Conference school or an ACC school because they only knew HBCU. So that even when they could go to one of those schools, it took a little while for them to say, you know what, that's a good fit for you. You know what, son, you'd be better off at Grambling. I mean, you go back and look at it, the first-round draft picks from, 1960 to 1979. Grambling had a number of them. Since then, they hadn't had a one.
No.
So it's just, and that's the way it's changed. So it's not a sign that things are going to change, but at least if you can be competitive and find a way, it's to me, it's the one area where you need to be really good developers. But what you're developing is the crumbs, the players that you don't get. And other than, say, Deion getting a few players, developing a staff is going to be very difficult because paying. Now, again, if you look at some of the guys that Deion is hiring, it's a lot of former ex-players that's never coached. And, they've got money. And so money's not the big deal. Let's go. Let's have fun. We'll do it. He'll raise money. He'll take a lot of his money that he'll make from the Subway commercials and whatnot. I'm sure he's probably going to do some things to make the facilities better and all that, give him an edge. But, Deion's got a long-term goal that's not at Jackson State. So the sustainability, is not going to be there. But it's certainly interesting to see what he's trying to do there.
Yeah, and I've talked about, I said, folks, go back and look at the 75 draft. Like 3 of the first 8, I think like 6 of the first 18 were from HBCU. So this is not sustainable. It is a nice little spike, and I hope that people in the moment just take kind of a look at Jackson State and some of the other schools, and they get reminded that it does all count. So we're going to take a quick break. We'll come back, jump into Championship Saturday with Chris Landry from Landry Football. That's next on the Chuck Oliver Show. Back with the Chuck Oliver Show on a Wednesday, and that means we're talking to Chris Landry. I want to bring Chris back in now. And Chris, Saturday night in Atlanta, Gators and Tide. How does UF get the win, given that what I think I have seen from them on a week-to-week basis is they're not very good running the football. They give up huge plays on defense, and they've got a nasty habit of getting down. I mean, like they were losing to Vanderbilt. They were losing to Kentucky in the second quarter. And you ain't going to come back against Alabama.
No, you're not, and there's really no path for them to win. The only path would be is if Alabama plays like Florida. I mean, and you just mentioned that Florida's been very lackadaisical out of the gate most of the year. They were completely unprepared and didn't take the LSU game seriously, pretty clear. And that attitude permeates. I mean, how you prepare is how you play, and they didn't prepare very well, and they got their comeuppance in that game. That's what would have to happen. Alabama would have to prepare and play like Florida did against LSU. They'd have to do that against Florida. Alabama doesn't do that. That's why Alabama's on a different level, because in addition to being the most talented, they are the best developed, they're the best prepared. And if anything, the message has changed from, hey, this Florida team by Alabama and Saban, this Florida team is great. Its offense is LSU-like. And now it's, hey, you see what can happen if you're not prepared? Look at Florida and how they took that game for granted last week against LSU. Look what happened to them. That is what happens to you if you don't prepare every day this week. And that's why it's so hard to beat Alabama, because the only way this game is anything other than an Alabama blowout is if Alabama plays it that way, or there's some significant injury that would affect the flow of the game, quarterback position, a couple of others. Alabama wins. I can't make a case for this even being competitive, even if Florida plays the best game of the year. And I don't know that I can see that consistency coming out of the gate from Florida, because it hasn't really happened all year.
Yeah, I remember a coach telling me a long time ago, you can't choose the opponent, but you can choose your attitude. And what you're saying about Dan Mullen in Florida, I think Kyle Pitts could have played. They're like, we could beat LSU without him.
And you're correct. And you know what? They didn't need Kyle Pitts to win the game. But the fact that that message goes to your team that, we don't need this. Well, then you know what? That's right. We don't have to work as hard. You know what? We don't have to worry about our technique quite as much, because we got this. Well, you don't got anything. You go and earn everything every day, and that's what happens. And you're right. I didn't mean to cut you off, but it's not the performance and the talent of Kyle Pitts, but the attitude that says, hey, he could play, but you know what? We got this. We're going to rest him for a game that's really important next week. Well, that's the message you send, and that's why your team literally and figuratively played in the fog the entire game. And then the overall lack of discipline and how you handle yourself on the field and all that, and the Missouri game. Well, then you don't have to worry about a player crossing the line throwing a shoe if you never have the line drawn. You never go down that path. Yep. It's the little things like that for Dan that he's got to clean up, because he's a brilliant offensive mind and one of the best at adjusting in-game offensively. But discipline and organization is where he needs to clean some things up.
And they started the game with 2 red zone possessions, and it equaled a total of 3. They went 73 yards on that first drive. I was like, you just went 73 yards and you left with 0 points. You can't.
That's right. And you know what? So when you're built around an offense and you're not effective in the red zone, and you throw a pick six, when you're so dependent on the offense, your offense has to be great every game, because the defense is not very good. And when you're just off your game, like they have been at times, it's tough to come back and win. In this case, they were more than just off their game. This was their worst performance of the year. So you're so right. And I think it exposed Florida to some degree that they're good, and at times they can be really good when they're hitting on all cylinders on offense. But when they're not, they can become pretty average looking quickly.
All right. I'll give you just a couple of opinions about Notre Dame. What I know about Notre Dame is they'll be prepared best they can be. They have a responsible upperclassman quarterback. They got grown men offensive linemen, and they got NFL guys on defense. That sounds like one heck of a team. I do not like them in the least against Clemson on Saturday afternoon.
No, I think this is the only thing to me is whether Clemson wins decisively in a blowout, and what eyebrow raising that could bring, or can Notre Dame play it closely? Look, the first game was about Notre Dame's ability to make this a good close line of scrimmage game because Clemson was limited what they could do in the passing game. So if it's a one-possession game and Notre Dame can keep it that way, they can make plays from the quarterback position. They can play possession ball. They can work the tight ends in the passing game. But if they get behind, this could get sideways really quickly because that's where you see Notre Dame's vulnerability. I think the fact that Clemson lost that first game, the fact that they got something to prove, and they don't need to do anything at Clemson but to win the game ugly by 1 point.
Yeah.
To make the playoffs, but I think they want to make a statement. They want to avenge the loss, and I think we're going to see an explosion relatively early on offense that could make this game a little bit more one-sided than people might think. So, no, I think Clemson wins. I think they win going away. I think Notre Dame is really good. I think they're the fourth team. I think when it's all said and done and all the dust settles this weekend, Alabama 1, Clemson 2, Ohio State will be up to 3 because they're going to want to say, you see, we really weren't even debating whether they were fourth. They were 3, and Notre Dame's at 4, and they certainly want to, because I think the film says that Notre Dame is clearly the 4th, and I think they're going to set up the Alabama, Notre Dame, and the Clemson, Ohio State semifinals. That's how I see it. And to be honest with you, it's kind of hard to sell anything else. And maybe chaos can happen. I hope games are good, but I don't know that they will be. I think there might be a lot of one-sided games this weekend.
Wrapping up with the man who is LandryFootball.com. Chris, we got like 60 seconds left. I think Jimbo's going to try to put a number on Tennessee just for some pretty points. I don't think it's going to matter because Texas A&M's not going to the playoffs, but I think that they're going to try to put up a number. I don't know if that's what that offense really does. So that's a little bit of a contradiction. What do you see happening in Knoxville Saturday?
Yeah, I think they'll pound them at the line of scrimmage. I think they will try to put points. I do think that this Tennessee team, it's an important game because if they're able to blow out Tennessee, look out there. That is not a lopsided loss that Jeremy Pruitt wants, with some of the check writers over there are not going to be happy with that. So competitiveness is important. The style that Texas A&M plays, as I mentioned, they're very much like Notre Dame. They're not as good as Notre Dame, but they're along the same lines. I think they can win the game decisively, but it's going to have to be a clean game for 4 quarters. I think other than coverage breakdowns, you don't see a lot of explosive plays. Again, you're right. A&M's very, very methodical. And look, winning impressively would help. It would help their case. It would help their argument. But you're right. They're not getting in unless there's a little bit of chaos, which means Ohio State has to lose to Northwestern or Clemson has to lose to Notre Dame. But I will say it would be interesting if Notre Dame were to get blown out. That's the scenario where if you're A&M, you at least like to have a big-time blowout win against Tennessee, because winning against Tennessee is not going to impress. Winning decisively might be the only thing that would make people take a second look.
Folks, he calls Belichick Bill. He calls Saban Nick. And you can get firsthand directly from Chris and his staff, LandryFootball.com, literally every single day all year long. Chris, it is so awesome every day at the website, and we always love Wednesdays as well. Thanks for making time, man.
Thanks for you. Appreciate you. Take care.
All right. Chris Landry, again, LandryFootball.com. And I agree with him. And see, that is the curveball for Jimbo, is when a team that's not really what they do. They enter a game trying to put up a number, they can get themselves in trouble. Hour 2 of the Chuck Oliver Show on a Wednesday, and not just any Wednesday. It is the first of the 3-day early signing period. And we are on the verge, folks. In a normal year, we would be talking about it right now. But because recruiting has been so, what do the kids say? Wonky? Is that a word? It's kind of off kilter.
I've never heard that word.
Wonky?
No.
W-O-N-K-Y.
Not even close.
So I'm even more down with the kids than you are. You need to go to, like, I don't know, was it Urban Dictionary? Look up wonky.
I'm called an old man daily by my girlfriend. 80s music in the car, all
right,
of it.
yeah. But if not for a much different recruiting calendar, we'd be talking about this concept right here. We're going to stop using the word early. This is just going to be the signing period because, as I said, when it was introduced in 17, I believe the number was 74% of FBS prospects signed, as well as it was a slightly higher number than that of the 4-star and 5-star kids who came off the board, not just during those 3 days, but certainly the very first day. And in 2018, everybody had caught on that, we're not getting left out again. Number jumped up to 81%. Last year it was 82%. I have no idea how it's going to wind up this year, but I was expecting a little less activity. And it appears that something we talked about last week. Do you remember we had the topic, and it was based around recruiting. I said, folks, if you are a high school prospect and you are getting offers, when you get the very first offer at the level you're hoping for, we talked about Dylan Moses and his dad saying, what do you mean by offer? If you get an offer at the level, not even the school, if you're you've got 5 FCS or 15 or 50 FCS and you get offered FBS, well, all right, it's time to jump up. If you're group of 5 and you get offered 1 Power 5, all right, it's time to jump up. Take it when it's offered because it's not going to be there very much longer. And it appears a lot of kids have taken that advice because, remember, you are competing against who? You're always competing against other high school athletes. You're always competing against JUCO transfers. You've always been competing against those two groups. Now you're competing against folks in the portal. And so scholarships have become harder to get, more valuable than ever. So when you get one of those offers, especially this year, it might be good to jump on it, and that's what a lot of kids are doing. So we're going to cover part of that during the update throughout the rest of the show, et cetera. But right now, let me get you all the headlines. Headline, top 5 in playoff rankings remain unchanged. The college football playoff rankings were released last night, and they are the final weekly updates. Sunday, we will have playoff seeds. I can't believe I'm saying that. Sunday, we will have playoff seeds announced. College Football Playoff Committee announced its final weekly rankings last night. The top 5, Bama, Notre Dame, Clemson, Ohio State, Texas A&M, the same top 5 from last week. Iowa State jumped into the 6th spot. I guess if they beat Oklahoma on Saturday, they'll have a chance to finish in the 5th spot. So, yay, Cyclones. You'll get into a New Year's Six bowl as a conference champion, but it's not going to equal anything as far as a playoff seed, top 4, et cetera. Cincinnati didn't play, and they dropped to 9. They'll have a chance to be a conference champion on Saturday as well. Cincinnati, who is it, Tulsa? Yeah, Cincinnati and Tulsa, I believe. I should know that. In fact, I do know that. It's Tulsa. Headline, Virginia Tech opts out of bowl game opportunity. Okay, Chuck, why specifically Virginia Tech? Well, there's a bunch of teams that have announced that. Boston College announced a bunch of teams in their conference, BC, Georgia Tech. Why'd you announce the Hokies? Well, Virginia Tech's 5-6 on the year. First of all, they played all of their games. And after the awful time they had just trying to get the season started, bully for Justin Fuente and everybody in that program in Blacksburg, they got the season completed. And they have put their hands up and said, and that's all we're doing. The kids, same story as everywhere else. They're worn out. Getting to this point, see, it wasn't free or easy to say, all right, you scheduled 11 games, and then 3 months later, here's your 11 games. We played them all. That wasn't easy. And so they are just they're just flat out exhausted, and they have decided to pass on any bowl game that invites them. Now, why would I mention Virginia Tech specifically? A couple of reasons. It ends the longest active postseason appearance streak. It had been 27 consecutive years. I don't know that in fact, it doesn't hold anywhere near the same weight as it would have. If you had a bowl streak going in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, even the 80s, it meant something. If you go back to the early 80s, there was an Independence Bowl, folks, that's in Shreveport. There was an Independence Bowl that I think had like number 14 versus number 19 playing. Do you know why? Because there were only 14 bowl games. And it was like Air Force and Ole Miss maybe, or Virginia Tech, 2 ranked teams in the top 20. The Independence Bowl doesn't get that anymore because there's so many more bowls. So the bowl streak doesn't necessarily carry as much weight, but Virginia Tech had gone 27 straight years, and they said, we know we could go this year, but we're out. Now, the other reason I wanted to mention the Hokies, you see that the Virginia Tech AD thought it was necessary to announce that Justin Fuente would return. Folks, what is wrong with us? Texas fans, shame on you. Virginia Tech fans, shame on. Do you know if Tom Herman wasn't your coach right now and he was available, who you would be pursuing? Texas Longhorns? You'd be pursuing Tom Herman. Virginia Tech, if you had Coach X and you had just fired him, do you know who you would be pursuing? Justin Fuente. Shame on you. At so many different places, you have a really, really, really good coach who has not had a perfect season. I do not understand, but Virginia Tech's announced that he is coming back. Final headline I'm going to give you. I don't know what's a headline. You know we got a bowl game next Monday? Like we have a bowl game in 5 days from right now. Myrtle Beach Bowl in Conway, South Carolina, which is not actually at Myrtle Beach. North Texas and App State. Next Tuesday, we have 2 bowls, and these are already determined, folks. We got matchups already determined. The 23rd, we got 2 more bowls. We got a bowl on Christmas Eve. We got a bowl on Christmas Day live from Montgomery, Alabama. I was emailing a buddy of mine yesterday who lives in Tuskegee, and I was like, are you aware that Montgomery has 2 bowl games this year? He said, until you just sent this email, no, I had no idea. Consider yourself up to date. See, that's what I do, folks. I deliver news to folks. People who live practically in Montgomery, they're finding out stuff from me. That's what I do. All right, we're going to take a quick break. We will come back, talk more college football next. I have not been able to find anyone to give me a reasonable path to victory for UF on Saturday night. Not a path that I could see. I'll give you a path right now. +4 in turnovers and 2 kick returns for touch. There's your path. A realistic path. I have not heard that yet. I'm going to turn to another learned individual when it comes to the game of college football. Lead SEC columnist, College Football Network, Heisman voter. Seen him on ESPN, Fox Sports. You can hear him on Sirius XM. Man's everywhere, including right now, I think somewhere in Utah. I want to welcome on our good friend Russ Mitchell. Russ, how you doing, man?
I am in Utah. I'm kicking tires and lighting fires in Utah.
Well, don't do that out there, man. That's pretty much a peaceful place, isn't it?
It is a beautiful place, man. I mean, if you've never had the chance in your life, and I think you have, but for anybody listening, if you've never had the chance to come out and visit the parks, the national parks, and drive around here in this area, just bring your own beer. But it's a really, really pretty place.
Yeah, and I'll go way back. I mean, I'm going to lose our producer here, but like John Denver, he had it figured out. He knew what he wanted, and that's where he went. Russ, let's talk a little bit about college football and Saturday night in Atlanta. I'll turn to you. I need a reasonable path for Florida to get a dub.
Well, first of all, I think that Florida has a better chance of beating Alabama than I think all of us thought LSU had of beating Florida.
True.
So, I mean, this is the reason why we play these games on the field.
True.
I think that in Florida clearly looked past LSU towards Alabama. And you saw that not only on the field in terms of the players, but also the coaches. Because you had guys, I mean, they had so many guys that just basically took the game off. They were so sure they were going to win. They had Pitts could have played. The star tight end, arguably maybe the best player in college football. He could have played. They decided to rest him for the Alabama game. And it's not just him on their running back, right? He stayed out. And there were tons of defensive players that didn't play in that game against LSU that will suit up against Alabama, right? I mean, you've got Davis. He's the safety. They got the linebacker Moon. They've got the other linebacker Hopper. They've got a lineman in Dunlap.
There's also the play calling. Obviously going for it on that 4th down instead of taking the 3. There was an assumption of victory by Dan Mullen.
It was interesting. That didn't bother me as much. Well, first of all, there was let me take a step back and decide how far out on the limb I want to go. Dan Mullen has a reputation for being moderately arrogant. And this entire season, he's been more arrogant this season than I've ever seen this cat. And the LSU game was the epitome of that arrogance, both before, during, and after, and some of the statements he made about Wilson's, personal foul. I think that I'm not at all surprised that, but you know what? They should have been able to. They should have been able to run over that LSU team. And I think by virtue of the fact, especially with a kid playing in his very first game, a true freshman playing in his very first game. I mean, yes, it hurts that you have 7 defensive starters who are not playing, but they should have been able to stomp on that team. And there were mistakes made by everybody on the Florida sideline. If they can clean that up when they go to play Alabama and carry this chip on their shoulder, I'm expecting a much chippier game with Alabama pulling away late in the 4th quarter.
What about in Charlotte? More of a contest?
I think so. Potentially more of a contest, but even then, I think everybody's eyes are going to be focused down in Atlanta to see what happens. That's the bigger thing. Ultimately, I think that the way they've played it out, both of them, regardless of the outcome, are angling to make it to the next stage.
Let's start in Indianapolis, I guess. I think not a lot of mystery to how that game goes. After Ohio State beats Northwestern, they'll improve to 6-0, I guess, at that point, and they will get the number 3 seed, I believe, from the playoff committee. Got to avoid some rematches there. What is going to be Russ Mitchell's response when Sunday morning or Sunday at noon the committee announces Ohio State as one of the 4 playoff seeds?
My announcement is going to be, if you look at the last 5 of the last 7 years or 8 years, it's been Ohio State's inclusion in the Final Four that's been the controversy. And this belief that by going to 4, we were somehow going to expand the pool of potential teams playing, has been a bit of a joke. And, you've got 4 teams. Who are they? Alabama, Clemson, right? Mm-hmm. Ohio State.
Notre Dame.
And Notre Dame. But no, there's one other. Oklahoma.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were talking about for this year.
That have accounted for 20 of the 28 spots since we went to 4. 20 of the 28 spots. If you throw LSU in there, it's like 23 of the 28. So this idea that we've sussed out college football, we've just barely scratched the surface. So that was a long answer. The short answer of what I'll get is I'm really excited to see Ohio State play, but we need 8 teams, and we need 8 teams more. We need that extra round of games even more than we ever needed. Oh. I want to see if some of these teams are good enough, especially this year, to be able to take a shot at being the national champion.
All right, now Russ, I'm going to talk like college hoops for a second to make a point. Like I can't remember the last time I watched a North Carolina Duke regular season game. I'll normally watch them when they play in Greensboro for the tournament. I will always watch March Madness because March Madness has been inflated so much. It has 100% devalued the college basketball regular season. Do you think there is because college football's regular season is the last one in any sport that still matters. When you lose, you bleed a little bit. I'm afraid of taking that away.
We won't take it away. You can't take it away. It's just not a big enough season. It's not a long enough season. Plus, if you are really worried about that, if that's something that's, keeping you up at night.
Late.
Then fine. Then just rank the teams. Rank the teams. So basically, Alabama. I'm sorry. Let me explain what I mean by that. Rank the 8 teams, and the first round of this playoff is played at home. Don't go play in Phoenix. Don't go play in Nolens. Don't go make money for some other private promoters. We've got these beautiful cathedrals to our sport, the Horseshoe, Tiger Stadium, whatever, right? Go ahead and let the boosters and the restaurants and the hotels that have sponsored that school and that team forever, let them make the money in the first round and make the 8 go and play at the 1. You want to make every game really count? Really count? Rank the teams. So that way, if you finish 5 instead of 4, you're on the road.
I don't know anybody that across a broad spectrum of topics, no, not just football, I don't know anybody that I have less common ground with belief-wise that I get along with so well than you, Russ. I want to go back to a 2-team playoff. I want to go the other way. I always talked about the BCS being a 2-team playoff. I thought that was good. Russ, always appreciate it, brother. Enjoy Salt Lake City and everywhere out west, and we'll talk to you again in 7 days, okay?
It just goes to show, brother, that, I don't want to get too up on the ledge there, but, we all get along. Some of my best friends have different views than I have, and we just figure out a way to find a common ground and move on. And that's what we got to try to get.
Disagreement does not have to equal hate. That's absolutely true.
No, and you don't get 100% on every football team. You don't get 100% on every football team.
Agree.
You got to.
It has been a different sports year, calendar year I'm talking, been a different sports season for every season, unlike anything that most of us have ever experienced. I mean, maybe if you were alive during World War II where you had, I don't know, like the Big Ten had 2 teams play 4 games and one team play 11 and then, a bunch play 7. All right, but that was back in the 40s. This year, when it comes to sports wagering, I have walked away from more games than I ever have before. And I've never really been a volume guy. I always, you pick 2 or 3 of the best plays of the weekend that you feel the best about and you ride with them. This year, I have just walked away from more of that action because it's been really, I realized there was a very narrow set of parameters that I wanted, and it was based a lot around availability, just like who do you have available this year. The NFL has been a little more predictable because you're not dealing with student bodies and, college kids and all that. And the NBA actually starts, I think, next week? I want to welcome on now a good friend of mine, known him for over a decade, and you can get to know him as well at docsports.com, docsports.com. It is a family-owned, family-run handicapping business since 1971, and you don't get that a lot in that industry. I want to welcome on my good friend, Robert Ferringo. Rob, how you been, brother?
I've been fantastic, sir. How you holding up?
I'm doing really well. Talk about the adventure of handicapping, specifically college, because like I said, the NBA when the bubble came back, and the NFL, that's been a different animal. But talk about the challenge of handicapping college football this season.
What a mess, right? So, yeah. Okay, so there's obviously a mathematical component to betting. Okay, it's the biggest problem that most people who bet have. They think, I know a lot about sports, so I can bet on sports, but they completely overlook the mathematical aspect, understanding the spreads and line movements. Okay, so there's that side. Then there's that psychological component also. And under the best of circumstances, trying to handicap college football, trying to predict the focus and motivation levels of 18, 19, 20-year-old boys, children, basically, is difficult, all right? But this year, under these circumstances, it's almost impossible. It's been a mess. It's been a big challenge. And interestingly enough, I've had 2 of the best gambling runs of my career this year in soccer and NBA. No, in soccer and NBA during the summer, killed it like I've never killed those. Oh,
so the bubble didn't. Did the bubble? It wound up being predictable.
It was phenomenal. Yes, it was perfectly predictable because it was just about the sports. Same thing with soccer, European soccer. When that first came back, it was just about the game. I have also had 2 of my worst runs in baseball and in football. I'm having one of the worst football seasons I've ever had. I'm not too proud to say. And I was terrible in baseball. So in the contained, controlled environments, killed it. It was so predictable. But outside of those bubbles, in these sports like football, NFL, baseball, it's been chaos. It's been tough. So you're a smart man to walk away from some bets. Some of those are the best bets we make, some of the best bets are the ones you don't make.
Well, let's talk a little bit about hoops, and I know that is honestly probably the sport that you're closest to. The NBA kicks it off next week, and there are so many intriguing storylines. Are you already to the point where you're dealing with individual games, or are you more still at the beginning of the season, you're just dealing out season totals and such?
Yes, I'm still taking that kind of macro, big picture look of who do I like, who do I think is going to be better than people expect, who do I not like. For instance, everybody loves Miami. You have that last picture, that recency heuristic where the last thing you saw of a team is what sticks in your mind. So when last we saw Miami, they were rolling through the Eastern Conference in the bubble, playing the Lakers tough in the championship game. Everyone expects that momentum to continue into this season. It will not. They are going to be one of the more overvalued teams in the NBA this year. So, don't like them. Actually like the Lakers more. I bet them this week they're almost 3-1. They're around plus 290 at my book to win the NBA championship. You're not going to get better odds than that. They are by far, bar none, the best team. They improved their roster over the offseason, and you're not going to get better than 3-1 on the Lakers, 3 or 4 months from now when they get into the playoffs. So if you think that they're going to repeat, and I do, now's the time to jump on.
Give me a quick comment about two teams that I'm wondering what the general feel is. New Orleans Pelicans, I think there's a lot of public excitement because of Zion. And then the Atlanta Hawks, who I think that there's never any public excitement about, but there may actually be some now.
Really funny that you picked those two teams, because going into last season, I was huge on New Orleans. Loved New Orleans. Well, one of my very close friends and another professional bettor loves the Hawks. He's all in on the Hawks. I'm not as high on the Hawks because, and I know this is blasphemy, but I'm not a big Trae Young guy. Incredible talent. Oh, no, incredible talent. His teams just never win. Going back to Oklahoma, if you look at the records, both straight up and against the spread, of teams that Trae Young is on, they're not very good. So I'm not pinning it all on him, but he is obviously the sun, and everyone else, revolves around him. So I got to kind of see it from them. I like New Orleans a lot. I still think that they're very much undervalued. They have a little bit of a Brandon Ingram problem, though. He is absolutely holding that team back. He's a black hole. When he's got the ball, it's going up. And I feel like once they get a little bit more continuity on their offense, they're going to be a really good team.
All right, let's talk college football. Folks, the reason I want to bring up NBA, I mean, like I said, that's Robert. That's probably his number one sport. Does a great job, and they're kicking off next week, so I wanted to mention that. Let's talk a little bit about Championship Saturday, specifically Coastal Carolina. That is not a fluke of a team. I saw them beat BYU, which has grown men on both lines of scrimmage, and they're playing for a conference championship against a pretty salty defense as well in Louisiana. I mean, most people think Coastal Carolina and Louisiana, you're going to talk about that game? I think it could be as good as any game that's played Saturday.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, and I like the fact that you pointed out that both of them are tough defensively. Okay, normally from this conference, the champion is the team that can score the most dynamic offenses. These are two really, really good defenses. I think Louisiana Lafayette is in the top 25 in rush defense, if I remember correctly, and that's where the game is going to be won or lost, is who can run the ball. Okay, and who can impose themselves physically in that game. However, I don't think that you're stopping Coastal Carolina. They have momentum, they have a mojo, they just have something about them. They not only are they 11-0, but think about this: they're 10-1 against the spread. So as good as you think that team is, they have been better, all right? In those small conferences, the sports books always jack up the numbers on the one or two top teams who are so obviously better than everyone else. They've been doing that with Coastal Carolina this year, and they keep beating the spread. So there's no way I'm betting against them this week.
All right, I have a buddy of mine who's a professional gambler out in Vegas, and he said for about 15 years he had a policy when it came to NFL Sunday with New England. It was either Pats or walk. He would say if I would either bet the Patriots or I would just walk away. I would never bet against them. Air Force and Army are scheduled to play Saturday afternoon. The total is 37. I think you just have to walk away from that because I don't know if it'll go over. And, Robert, I don't know that if I've ever bet under in a lower number than 37.
Yeah, one of the real sharp plays last week was the under in the Army-Navy game, with that total right around 36.5. So, are you going to catch that same wave this week? I'm not sure. The interesting thing about this game is that the two most lopsided games in terms of betting action this week are Alabama-Florida. Okay, 86% of the betting action has coming in on Alabama. And this game, Air Force Army, 85% of the action is coming in on Air Force. Looks like a lot of people are predicting a letdown for Army after last week's bet, but that's way too unbalanced action for me. So this is one that I'm going to sit out.
All right, let me ask you about a couple of off-the-radar SEC games before I let you run. Missouri and Mississippi State, they're trying to wrap up their seasons. Regardless of what happened last Saturday against Georgia, Missouri is extremely well coached. I like the young quarterback. Even though he's young, I like the young quarterback, and they're better on defense than most people think if they just watch the Georgia game. And I can't tell you much about Mississippi State at this point as far as their passing game and any consistency there. What do you think about Saturday's matchup?
Going back to what we talked about at the outset, it's about focus and motivation, right? And Mississippi State is absolutely not a team that I trust right now. Right now, Mike Leach is weeding out the non-hackers. Okay, he doesn't like a lot of his players, and a lot of his players probably don't like him. So I don't think that they're going to have any motivation at all to play in this game. Missouri, they do have something to play for. They want to stay above 500. They want to get to a better bowl game. If I remember correctly, I think they're number 25 in the country right now. They want to hang on to that top 25 ranking. So two completely different motivation levels. I don't see any focus coming out of Mississippi State. Normally, this is Mike Leach's role, right? He's an underdog. That's always when you want to bet this guy. But right now, there's way too much drama going on behind the scenes in that locker room. They're 100% a team to bet against.
Last game for you, it's Ole Miss and LSU, and I have all kinds of respect for what Max Johnson, true freshman, on the road, in the swamp, blah, 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 all of that. And I'm serious. I have a lot of respect for what LSU got done last Saturday. That was every bit a Florida problem as much as it was LSU rising up. All I like in this game is the over, and it's like 78.
Yeah, yes, not a lot of defense going to be played in this game. Not a lot of defense played in Ole Miss games just in general. They brought that Big 12 ball to the SEC, huh? But, I mean, yeah, you got to predict a letdown for LSU. Same thing. What's their motivation? What's their focus here? What are they going to bring to this game? This means a lot more to Ole Miss if they can go into LSU because, hey, LSU, say what you want about them, they're still the defending national champions, right? So if you're a team like Ole Miss who's still trying to establish yourself, establish that Lane Kiffin way, establish yourself in the pecking order of the SEC West, this still means something to you. You want to win this game. So you got to wonder where LSU's focus is going to be after pulling off that huge upset as a 24-point underdog last week. For me, it's Ole Miss or nothing.
All right, guys, that's Robert Ferringo from DocSports.com. It's DocSports.com. It has been located in the same place, run by the same people since 1971. Robert, how long you been there? Almost a decade? More?
15 years.
Wow.
Since 2005.
Okay, but we always say if you come on, you can't do this for free. You got to give the listeners something. What are you going to give the listeners?
Yeah, just go to DocSports.com. Email, call in, say you heard me rapping with Chuck. I will give you a free week's worth of picks in whatever sport you want. College basketball is crushing it right now. I really like Purdue tonight. There's a little free pick for you. Chuck, you and I have talked about this before. Anytime you see an unranked team favored over a ranked team, that should be a red flag. So jump on Purdue tonight.
Ding, 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 folks. Again, DOC Sports, get with Robert. It's a free week. I would say take his NBA selection starting next week. But, Robert, we always appreciate the time, brother. Thank you.
Stay healthy and Merry Christmas.
Same thing, man. Robert Ferringo from DocSports.com. Dabo Swinney, the cut that I was referencing yesterday during the program, that he was addressing comments made by the SEC commissioner, but he actually deflected to the Big Ten. Didn't address anything. Greg Sankey had made a comment about how the SEC's top teams were going to play the weekend before Championship Saturday. And again, I didn't expect LSU to go to Florida Field and get that win on Saturday night. I knew it was possible. They got good players. Didn't think it was going to happen. I wasn't even considering the real possibilities, especially when I saw that Max Johnson was starting. I know TJ Finley's had a rough go of it, and he's been turning the ball over way too much. But it surprised me a little bit when Johnson was announced. I think somebody told me earlier in the week that that's what to expect. I don't even know if he made it official or not, but I just got a text message saying I think it's going to be Johnson on Saturday. So it surprised me when LSU got the win. It surprised Greg Sankey as well. It surprised Dan Mullen. And because of LSU getting the win, there is one fewer possible playoff team from the Southeastern Conference. Going into the game, it was possible Florida makes the playoffs. It's possible Alabama. It was possible Texas A&M makes the playoffs. Now, what was likely? Only Alabama was going to go. But in sports, I say this all the time, folks, what's the one thing in sports that you want? You just want your shot. It is the biggest unscripted element of our life. You can have a personal role in the outcome of so much else. In sports, you just got to sit there and watch. Like I said, it's unscripted. You can't, and don't bring up the World Series 100 years ago. You can't determine the outcome. And so when LSU goes in and gets the win, you have one fewer possibility from the conference. And that's it. I just want my shot. Just give me my shot. No guarantees. It's sports. The most unpredictable, the biggest unscripted event in our lives on a regular basis. It's, hey, how's that game going to turn out? And so what Sankey said was, like, our teams are playing and there's risk. Anytime you take the field, there's risk. Well, then Florida played it out that way. The ACC, they didn't take the field. And Dabo knew that, and Dabo didn't have any pushback. And so Dabo said, well, what about the Big Ten? They're only playing 6 games. And, okay, that's a different topic, if you would, but it doesn't have anything to do with what John Swofford decided and the ACC decided. He didn't, and this is a valuable skill for college football coaches, he didn't address the question. He didn't respond to Greg Sankey. He just said, hey, what about them in Columbus? If you want to ask who are the 4 best teams in college football, I almost certainly would include the Buckeyes in that. I have to project part of that, though, because they have only played 5 games. So I have to project that what I have seen, that's really who they are. Where we were projecting Florida this time last week in how they matched up against Alabama. They didn't match up well enough against LSU. So there's always risk, and it's not just lip service. It's not just stuff you make up. So, again, that was Dabo Swinney talking to the media. Let me go ahead and wrap this up with a closing argument. There were 5 SEC programs that could have made a change this offseason. I have the scorecard for you, and spoiler alert, the firings might not be over. The 3 programs of the 5, 3 programs have already fired their coaches. Kentucky hasn't and won't. The 5th, Tennessee. Jimbo is going to put up a number on Saturday. That's going to be his number one goal. They are in they're taking a risk, but they actually don't have anything to lose. That's the interesting part. They can lose the game, but it won't necessarily, quote, cost them anything. If they were already positioned for the playoffs, they would want to win by 1 point. In this case, it doesn't matter if they win by 1, by 7, by 10, or if they lose. Any of those, I gave 4 outcomes just then. You win the game by 1, by 7, by 10, or you lose outright. all 4 of those will affect the Aggies in the playoffs the exact same way. They won't really be considered. To be considered, there will have to be other stuff happening in other cities, plural. But what needs to happen in Knoxville on Saturday is you win by about 5 touchdowns. That's the Texas A&M side of this. Just to put ourselves in, to give ourselves a chance, we need to put up a number. That's the Aggie side of this. Folks, I'm more because I know how that's going to turn out. They're probably going to win by 3 or 4 touchdowns, still not make the playoffs, and they'll go to whatever bowl they go to. I'm more interested in the Tennessee side of this because Pruitt could get fired before he's out of the stadium Saturday night. It could be a situation where he doesn't even appear for the post-game presser, and I've seen that happen before. So we're all concentrating on the Texas A&M side, and what's that going to mean for the Aggies? Look across the field. If Texas A&M is able to put up a number, Jeremy Pruitt is the coach that I'm going to be paying attention to and seeing if he's there in the post-game press conference because, again, even Phil Fulmer, who got his job so that he could then hire Jeremy Pruitt to Pruitt's job, Phil Fulmer is going to give him every chance possible, but you lose at home this season finale by 3 touchdowns, he's going to have a hard time keeping his job. That is my closing argument brought to you by the law offices of Alexander Shannara and Associates, wherever you are in the Deep South, whether it's Florida, Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee, wherever. If you need legal expertise, you need Alexander Shannara and Associates.
Gets the Burt treatment on Saturday? Is that what, maybe? That's one that I'll never forget of him. Let me go ahead and start off with telling you all I was just pulled into a room and I was fired.
Yep.
So this will be my last press conference here. Truly just remarkable, to say the least. One of the largest surprises of signing day is, Chuck, as close as we are near the Georgia Tech program, it is something that I saw on my phone today that I thought I would never see come out of their sports information department on a day like this, where just a couple of years ago, you had a coach on campus there who did not like this day and had told you that he did not like this day. And now all of a sudden I'm seeing 21 players signing their letters of intent here in this early signing period. It's officially 16 today, and then 5 that are transfers into the program from other college programs. But that is something, too, that with Jeff Collins, it kind of surprised me. Me and you talked about it during the break, that I'm really kind of shocked that they're not taking up a bowl game this year and giving those young guys the opportunity. But I think with this signing class and the returning talent that Jeff Collins has, he's just saying, hey, we don't need to jump through hoops anymore for this season. Let's get to spring, and then let's really, in earnest, have year 2 start next year.
Yeah, I really do believe the programs right now who are opting out of bowl games, they're doing it for the best reasons possible, and they're looking around, taking the pulse of the team, and realize they ain't got another game in them, maybe. Like Vanderbilt. They didn't even talk about a bowl game. It was the regular season finale. We ain't got another game in us, and that's real. So that's what's happening at Georgia Tech. Dan, good job. Matt, everybody behind the glass. Appreciate the listeners. Give me 22 hours, folks. I'll recharge those batteries. Promise. Be back this time tomorrow with more college football conversation right here on The Chuck Oliver Show.